We're on.
Welcome
Woo!
to episode 2 of our Tribe Talks. My name's Sandy Golder. I'm here with Steph and Abigail today, and today's going to be a really special call. So thanks for joining us. So if you're joining us through our YouTube Live or Facebook Live, if you can just agree to, what does it say to them, Steph? Like agree to the terms that allows us to see your name, and that should be the text of this post. And then we can feature your questions or comments when they come up, and we know who they're from. So Tribe Talks. What is Tribe Talks? Tribe Talks was created because we wanted to create a world that is more compassionate and understanding and inclusive. And our community of amazing mums and parents has so many different conditions and disabilities that are part of that. And we really just want to educate the world on what these families have to live with every day, how you can support them, and how we can create a healthy, happier and more compassionate world. So welcome to Abigail, our special guest for today.
Abigail, thank you for having me.
No worries. We're excited to share your story with everyone. So Abigail is a mum of 3 beautiful kids, and she's got a really unique story, and we're super excited to share that with you today. She's also a blogger, so she's sharing her journey online and helping other families of children with rare genetic conditions. So welcome to the call, Abigail.
No, thank you for having me. So excited.
Us too. So can you just tell us fill us in a bit about yourself and what your journey in the special needs parenting world has been like so far?
Yeah, I told Steph we could talk about this all day. Like you said, I have 3 children. My middle child, Matthew, was 5 last year. He was born with a really rare genetic condition that he didn't get diagnosed with until he was 4 and a half. And it was a really complex medical condition. So Maddie never ate orally. He's had a tube from about 12 weeks old and a permanent tube placed after that. In the end, he was on oxygen and CPAP and all kinds of things. So really, really medically high needs, even at home when he was well. And but we didn't know before he was born. And when they did genetic testing, all of it came back fine. They couldn't find anything. They knew he wasn't fine, but they couldn't find anything. And for me in the beginning, it was very much the doctors would ask me questions like, do you think he can see you? And I was like, what? And they're like, what about hearing? Do you think he can hear you? And I would be like, what are these questions? What are you getting at? He was at the time less than 12 weeks old. So I was like, what baby can see at 12 weeks old anyway?
Yeah.
And what do you notice about their hearing at that age?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginning of the journey, but it took me a long time. My psychologist asked me, so when did you know that Matthew had a permanent condition? I was like, oh, not for ages. She was 6 or 9 months old before I realized, hang on a minute, this is not going away.
Yeah.
And they weren't telling us anything because the doctors, they didn't know either. They had no idea. It took them a long time to kind of go, yeah, this is definitely, we think this is not normally normal to this is definitely not normal. And Matthew passed away last year in March from what happened was his brainstem didn't develop. And we didn't know that until after he was diagnosed. He was diagnosed as one of 3 in the world, and the 3rd one was diagnosed after he was. So and that child had an MRI which showed changes on the brain. So we were already in a place where Matthew had got sicker and sicker, but we still couldn't explain anything was happening.
Wow.
So when that other child had an MRI, that's when our pediatrician said, all right, we'll take a look. We talked about doing an MRI. The neurologist had asked for an MRI, but we hadn't it required an anaesthetic, which was massively dangerous for Matthew. And so my pediatrician needed a really good reason to do it. So he'd been avoiding it until that point, and when we got it, they came back. They avoided telling us what the MRI said for ages. And in the meantime, he'd been back in hospital. So he was at ICU when they told us the results of the MRI. And they got us all in a room. They got the neurologist up. Everyone was there. Palliative care. Matthew had been with palliative care since he was 12 months old anyway, because he had so many chest infections. But everyone was there, and basically neurology said his brainstem hasn't developed since 22 weeks gestation.
Oh my goodness.
And in that year when he was 4, he had grown a good 6 inches or something. So we'd hit a sweet spot, like he was actually growing and putting on weight and stuff. But the more he grew, the less his brainstem could cope, which is why all the other issues had increased at the same time, things like gut failure and the central apnea, which, just to explain that, that's when your brain doesn't send the messages to your lungs to breathe. It's supposed to be automatic and whatever, but that automatic thing, that's run by your brain stem.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't work, you've got massive issues. And so things that should happen automatically just stop happening, and that's what happened when he passed away. The day he died, he was breathing like 4 times a minute instead of, for a child of his age, 30 plus times a minute. Yeah, so I warn people we'd need tissues.
I'm just like, I was hoping you're going to keep talking because I'm trying to myself. So
yeah,
I think that was really hard for you in that, there was only 3 known cases and you were the second. So there's literally like no information about it.
None at all. The only thing that they could tell us about the condition was that they believe the chromosome that was affected, it's called HDAC2. Yeah, you'll hear that again sometime soon. Not. That it was a chromosome that they think is associated with learning, which it's a little bit like nothing to do with what we wouldn't know if he had trouble learning. He had trouble breathing. Like, who cares? But yeah, that's all they could tell us. That, and the other child had a change on their MRI, and the other child was 12 weeks old. Maddie had an MRI between the 12 weeks, which was the first time he went to ICU, and about 6 months old, because they wanted to rule out brain damage from that first ICU trip, because he was on a ventilator for 2.5 weeks and he failed extubation twice. So they wanted to rule out brain damage. So they'd kind of all gone, nah, his brain looks all right, but he's still little, so your brain's not fully developed at that point. So it was interesting that the 12-week-old had changes on their brain. But yeah, other than that, that's it. That's all you have to go on. That kid has a change on their brain. They've all got learning disorders. We had a conversation about autism because the first person or child, I don't even know, had autism as well. So we had a brief conversation about whether Maddie had that. But like, based on our limited understanding of what he had going on, because he was because he couldn't talk, but he also couldn't roll over or sit or stand or any of those things. So communication was facial expressions and voice tone and stuff like that. So based on what we knew, we didn't think that was something he was dealing with.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the medical community is now, I mean, obviously this is quite recent in the big scheme of things that this happens, so you would be following that quite closely. Are they in a position where they're slowly catching up to this and doing more and more research, or like what's the position of that?
I think what they are in the position of is that genetic testing is becoming more and more readily available, and which means that more and more, so if he'd been born 10 years ago, his first pediatrician told me this, if he'd been born 10 years ago, he would have been diagnosed with CP and that would have been the end of it. But and my Matthew's pediatrician, who I still love, and I sent him an email last week and he emailed me back just to say hi, he refused to diagnose him because he knew there was something going on that he didn't understand, and sometimes putting a label on it to fit a category or to like put on paperwork stops that process of investigation and whatever else. So work of like SWAN and the genetic councils and all of that stuff is massively important, because we're still having to educate doctors that there is like stuff out there.
Yeah.
There is more to it, and they can easily order, you know, the first level of testing and see where that goes. So yeah, on one hand, we wanted a diagnosis because all your paperwork asks for it, you know, that, but 4.5 years down the track, we weren't expecting to get one. And we also knew whatever it was, it wouldn't help us, because unless it's an understood condition, like writing it down means nothing. Like it's not going to approve you for any kind of funding. It's not going to, you know, open up a whole new world of anything, because it's like nobody knows what it is. So it doesn't actually help. So it wasn't the diagnosis, it was the MRI that gave us anything to work on, you know, anything to go on. So, but I think it's really cool what they're doing
with the genetic tests and
and also how fast they're getting it done now. It took us like 2 years, you know, to one of the tests, I think, maybe.
Wow.
I don't understand that process.
Well, so there are only certain hospitals, like labs in the world that run the tests.
Right.
So if you have to send it to the US or UK or Adelaide, or I think ours go to Adelaide, I don't know. And there's only like, so everybody you know, heaps of people want the test, and there's only so many labs that do it. That's why it takes so long. But we have a friend who got tested before Matthew was born and didn't get results until like after he did, kind of thing, because the technology advances, they get quicker at doing it. So, you know, being born later worked in his favor in terms of the results and getting that process done.
Yeah, it's I know that not everyone can relate exactly to what you're talking about with doctors and, you know, wanting to get the diagnosis, but I feel like there is a part of like every child's diagnosis process where the medical professionals want them to fit in a box, because then they understand what to do with the box. But often they don't fit in a box. There is no box, right? And then everyone gets confused about what's the right thing to do. So, and I think I said this last week in last week's call, like doctors are humans just like us, and they're doing, you know, the best they can with the knowledge that they've got. But, you know, they are human beings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, in the end, I knew that I was the world's foremost expert in HDHC too. So if I go into ED and a doctor says, right, we'll do this, this, and this, I'm just like, hold up. Let's not do that. Or they'd be like, oh, what's it called? Let me Google it. And I'd be like, no, don't waste your time.
Just ask me, I'm Googling.
Yeah. I'm all you got.
So Jane says, I agree with Abigail. Genetic testing is improving a lot. And I suppose it will just keep improving with the technology that
as long as they keep getting funding, as long as, like I said, people like SWAN and whatever the genetic alliances are, keep lobbying to make sure that each year we get more funding, then Otherwise, like if it falls off the radar, you know, something else becomes more important to some politician, unfortunately. That could be a struggle. But as long as, you know, the further down the track we get to, I guess the less likely that is to happen, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I said to Steph before the call, I'm like, what was Matthew's condition called again? Just so I was prepared. And Steph's like, it doesn't have a name. It's like numbers and letters. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So when we first spoke, I Googled his condition. And I was like, oh, okay. Like
what does it say? It's an enzyme, right?
Yeah, it was like a medical journal with like So it's amazing to be speaking to you and to get that insight, because it's nothing that you can Google or find out online right now. So
what we'd usually talk about now is top 3 things you'd like people to know about the condition. However, I think you've covered like most that you can, like in your story. So I know you've mentioned Swan a couple of times, and is there like, how did you cope with this rare genetic condition? Do you want to talk about that instead? Like, what were the supports that you were able to access? Because I know you actually have a lot to do with Swan now, right?
Yeah, last year I was like the top enroller of new members to Swan. So Swan is syndromes without a name. And they were a massive game changer for me because we were part of very special kids who support children with life-limiting illnesses. But Swan was a whole different thing because they do focus on peer support. So they were just there facilitating us all getting to know each other or other parents and getting to know the journey. And I know a lot of people find, like, I don't know, this is my assumption, but for you guys, autism helps bring you together, right? And is one of the things you have in common. Where for Swan parents, what we have in common is that the doctor's most common used phrase is, "We don't know." And so that is what brings us together as a Swan community, is the fact that we're just dealing with people who don't know all the time. And that makes it a different way to deal with the system and all those kind of things. So for me, peer support was massive. And as having a child with a rare or undiagnosed, because he was, 4.5 before I got a diagnosis, and we'd already been with Swan for a couple of years, was super important because there was support nowhere else. There was no one else supporting us without a diagnosis. So that was really huge. Yeah, connecting with other people who have the same questions, going through the same journey, the same struggles. And it's also like, oh, what do you ask the doctor when you need a funding application and the doctor's got nothing to write on it? How do we approach this? What do we have to talk about? What other supporting documentation can we provide to get through that hoop? Matty was lucky, quotation marks, because he had cortical vision impairment, and that meant he was legally blind. That's a box.
Yeah.
He could tick a box. That's how he got his first lot of funding. So Swan's really helpful with that. And the founder and president, or CEO, I think she is now, does heaps of advocacy and connecting Swan with the other places, and lobbies politicians. Sometimes she'll ring you up and she'll be like, I need you to go down and have a meeting with this politician who's in your area. Just be the face, be the people in the community and tell your story, to make sure that we're on the map and they don't forget that we're here and we've got undiagnosed kids. But I found for my story, the turning point was when I stopped focusing on my own problems and realized there's a whole lot of people out there who are in the same boat, and it wasn't just me. Networking was a massive change for me, and Swan was part of that. Something I found after I realized that I had done that. But yeah, it's one of the reasons why I invested so much time in it.
You've really turned such a, devastating, heartbreaking situation into a really positive thing for other people. And I know that, you've been writing a blog and, you're doing everything you can to sort of help those families feel supported. So you want to fill everyone in a bit about what you've been doing there? Yeah,
so I started writing the blog not even 8 weeks, I reckon, after Matthew passed away. And for me, my motto for that, for the reason for doing that, was if I can turn my pain and my experience into something that helps other people, then it makes it a little bit worth it. Without it, or without being able to do these kind of things, it's kind of like, what was the point of those 5 years? Like, what was the point of putting him through that and all of us going through that? So that was massively huge to me. And when I started that journey when he was about 2 years old, of like, hang on a minute, I'm not the only mum who hasn't been taking care of myself. If I look around me, I see people getting divorced. I see people going to hospital themselves. I see people having massive weight issues from stress. I see, that's what I see everywhere. And, once we started getting support, I was like, okay, so there's support for the kids in every possible aspect you can ask for. But who's saying to the parents, you don't have to stay in survival mode. You don't have to stay stuck. And PTSD is pretty common in the medical community. You don't actually have to live with that. You can actually deal with it. I think the term's called post-traumatic growth. And I was like, when someone said the term to me, I was like, that's what I was thinking about, that's the term. So you don't have to stay that way. And no professional is telling us that. We're there and they come and do their comforting speech or their, I'm sorry, this is so difficult for you speech, but nobody's going, I know this is really hard, but here are some things that you could do for you and your family and for this journey to make it actually better and to thrive in this time instead of just suffering.
Yeah. And I think that's inspiring to so many parents on so many levels, whether they have a child with a rare genetic thing or a child with special needs or just a child. Sometimes, things don't go to go. And I wrote a post yesterday and I said something about when life gives you lemons, you can either suck it or you can make epic margaritas. I do love a margarita.
Yes.
But, there is stuff that's going to happen in life that just really sucks. And, for some people it's going to suck more than others. But, I love what you've done and just, that can be such an inspiration and a game changer for somebody else. You've been through it, but you have that experience that you can share, and that's just so awesome.
Yeah, and I guess, there are pretty awful stories out there, and there's always, like they say, there's always someone worse off. But I'm like, hang on a minute. My son passed away. Got the breadth of the experiences in, of how bad it can get. And I haven't had everybody's story. I've only got mine. But if I can say, yeah, there's a way to pick up where you're at and improve things, then, everyone should be able to consider that part of their story. And your lemon thing, you can taste the lemon and decide, oh, that's awful. And you can choose to keep sucking on it, or you can choose to find a recipe. Do you know what I mean? It's a choice. And it seems like in this journey, people don't realize that they don't have to. There is a choice. They can stop sucking on the lemon.
And that's, I think, is so similar with what you do and what we do. It's so great to hear.
I love that. I've had goosebumps on loop for 15.
I'm trying to hold it together while we do this. I said to Steph, we need to schedule this one when I'm not hormonal, because I know I was all time.
I know, I'm it's crying every 3 seconds. So,
I want to ask you our last question around how the wider community can support families like yours, but not only with rare genetic conditions, because we sort of had Heather sharing that last week, but also for families who have lost a child. How can the community or even our Thrive Tribe community or the wider society support families who are going through that?
So tricky, because last year after my son passed away, I had already known someone, a boy named Reese, died 6 weeks before he did, and we were really close. And then I went to 6 funerals last year of children.
Wow.
So what I know from that is that every person grieves differently. Palliative care nurse told me one day, she goes, grief is like a fingerprint. It's unique to just you. So everyone's going to handle it differently. So when someone asks me that, I'm always like, oh, yeah, but is this just me, or is this what helps other people? So I try to be really aware of that when I talk about it. But space and opportunities to talk about the child. Because in our house, our kids And, you know, my husband, like Matthew's name comes up, you know, every day. And just because he's not here doesn't mean he's not part of our family anymore. So that's normal for us. And some people struggle with, I struggle a little with this, with the, I'm so sorry. And you're like, well, Maddie was a massive amount of pain, you know, and I don't know that I'm sorry he's gone, even though I really miss him. But ask another parent and they would have them back every day of the week for as long as they could have them. So one thing that people said to me that I actually found really helpful, and I don't know if it's just me, but I was really sad to hear the news about Maddie, because that person was owning their feelings and not projecting anything on me. Yeah. When you say, I'm really sorry, you're kind of going, why aren't you? Like, that's what I was hearing, you know, like, wow. You're owning your own feelings. And people who bring up Matthew, independently of us bring up Matthew, really touched my heart, who are like, I was thinking of Maddie the other day, like, Maddie's got 4-year-old cousins, and, you know, their mum messaged me, you know, Maddie was talking about Maddie today. I just was thinking of you and I want you to know we miss him. You know, that's really huge to know that you're still thinking of him.
Yeah, the impact on the world, even though they were short, he was here for a short time, he still had that impact.
Yeah, and we're not the only ones who miss him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, like, when someone passes away, all the things like meals and grocery shopping, and they're actually helpful. Yep, absolutely. I clean for me anytime. But at the same time, we had some of that before Maddie passed away, because we knew just before Christmas, we knew he was not going to make it. And he passed away the first week of March. So a lot of that period we had lots of extra help. So then at the same time, you also want your own space back too. So you have to be really sensitive of that. But yeah, meals and all of that, anything I don't have to think of. People actually did my grocery shopping for me. I was like, oh, that's so weird. But also I don't have to leave the house and I don't have to pretend I'm okay.
Yeah.
But also, like, when I started doing the blog, I spoke for Swan last year in front of 500 people to do a fundraiser. So if I want to do something, I'm also allowed to want to do something and not be okay at the same time.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Steph, did you have any other questions? Are you all right, first?
I just feel really, really humbled that you have chosen to be part of this today. Like, just it's everything that we wanted, to be able to step outside of autism and talk about disability and in all its different forms. And, you know, you mentioned like the response of people saying, I'm sorry. And it came up last week with Heather as well.
The same thing.
Yeah, and she had like a different angle about like why that didn't happen with her. And if I actually think about it, a lot of the time I'll say, I'm sorry. Like, and it's now even my own, you know, the way that I interact that I could say and do. So it's been such a powerful thing and real tangible things that families and people can do to rethink the way that they act and speak and you know, treat diverse families. So I'm just really thankful for you. Yeah.
There's lots of love for you in the comments.
Yeah. I look forward to reading them when we're done. I'll jump in there and chat to them.
Abigail.
Thank you. Hopefully, I kind of often reflect, okay, I love to be inspirational, but I also want to see change.
Yeah.
I want to see people's lives changed. Inspiration is like, yep, that's a nice feeling. But if nothing changes, you know, what have we, you know, achieved? Like, what have I achieved? But so look after yourselves is also one of my huge mottos, like, because everybody's looking out for your kid, but who's looking out for you?
Exactly. Jamie says, Abigail, thank you so much for sharing your story and educating the community about your beautiful son. Joanne says, heartfelt.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you for sharing. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us for our second episode of Tribe Talks. We will be back next week. Actually, before we go, Abigail has a blog that we're going to share the link for, and we might even get the link for Swan from her as well and pop that in there as well. So if there's any mamas or families out there that want to check it out, then they absolutely can. Narissa says, what is looking after yourself? Narissa, we're going to have a it's actually my cousin. We're going to have a chat.
We're in trouble.
We'll be back next week for our third episode of Tribe Talks. Don't miss it. And please share what we're doing. So we want to get these messages out to as many people as we can. So thanks, Abigail, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.